I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this episode of Data Exposed Live. We are super excited to have you joining us today. We have a really exciting set of episodes, which we're going to be kicking off today. But before we get into it, I just wanted to mention that wherever you're streaming from, whether it's Learn TV, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, be sure to comment with your questions, concerns, comments, just say hi. We have people standing by to help answer your questions on chat. And if there's time at the end, we'll even take questions on the video live. So be sure to be adding your questions in throughout the session. Now, for the session today, we are kicking off a really interesting Azure SQL Security series. And to kick this off, we've brought in Joachim Hammer, who I'm going to welcome in now. And we basically brought him in to do this whole security series. So we have 6-hour-long episodes planned over the next few months for you to learn more about security. Joachim, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell everyone a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. Hello, Anna. Thanks for hosting us. And I'm excited to be here too. I've been a program manager in Microsoft and SQL for over 13 years. I've worked on a number of topics and components and features. And for about the last 4 or 5 years, I've been leading the security team here in SQL, in Azure SQL. And before Microsoft, I was a professor at the University of Florida. And yes, so this is an exciting series that we're kicking off. The goal here is to talk about the comprehensive security portfolio that Azure SQL offers and how our customers, the audience, can use the controls that we have to devise a security story so that they can mitigate the risk they have identified, then implement that security strategy and monitor for compliance. So I'm kicking it off today with the first episode, which is really a quick overview of Azure SQL to orient us. And then I'll talk about the different areas, the different security areas, and how we think about our features, how we group them to make it easier to, as I said, to devise a security strategy. And then in subsequent episodes, in the remaining 5 episodes, we will then come in and dive deeper into each area. We'll talk about best practices, how to use the controls and features. We'll have plenty of demos and sample code to make it real.
Awesome. It sounds like a really exciting series. I'm looking forward to learning more, and I'm sure our viewers are too. You know, without further ado, let's just get right into it.
Sounds good. Actually, before I jump in, I just want to talk a little bit about the breadth of Azure and how security and compliance really permeates everything we do here. So let me go and talk a little bit about the different pieces, and that helps us then figure out where Azure SQL is and how the security fits in. So roughly speaking, Azure, when you talk about Azure, there is the infrastructure layer, which are the compute VMs, the networking, but also services like business continuity, disaster recovery. And then, of course, there's the data platform. This is where SQL, Cosmos DB, Synapse are. And then we have a rapidly growing layer of sort of broadly called AI, artificial intelligence, and these are features and the tools like machine learning, cognitive services, bot services, and so forth. And taken together, these components, these capabilities, help our customers take advantage of business opportunities, be it renewing or upgrading their on-prem applications, or migrating, modernizing into the cloud, or anywhere in between, using a lot of the hybrid features that we're offering. We're also cognizant of the fact that IoT devices are getting more and more important. And so Azure really, when you look at Azure, it really spans the entire space from on-prem, from our customer data centers on-prem, into the cloud, into our data centers, and to the edge. And all of this is protected by a foundation of integrated identity, security, and compliance components. And so this is really everything. So as I said, security and compliance really play a key role here. And let me actually show you on the next slide how far we've come in terms of security and compliance. So if you look back, 1989 or so was the first data center that we stood up, that Microsoft stood up. And since then, Microsoft and Azure have invested over $15 billion in infrastructure, making sure we're meeting compliance and regulatory requirements in countries by different countries and governments, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide here. So there's lots and lots of compliance regulations, both locally as well as countrywide and worldwide. And we're continuing to invest in this infrastructure. Microsoft actually has a commitment to deliver the most trusted cloud and really address customers, both commercial customers as well as government customers.
Awesome. Thanks, Joachim. This is really interesting because it shows us not just in the data side, but in Azure all up and Microsoft all up, the investments we're making in the security space. Do you think you could kind of dive in for us and tell us a little bit more about what this means for Azure SQL specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go a little bit deeper and talk about the data platform. So to help orient us a little further. So as you can see, Azure Data, the portfolio contains quite a few services. So there's on the right-hand side, we distinguish the operational stores, and that includes SQL, of course, but there's Cosmos. We have SQL DB on Edge now. We have the open source systems. And then we have this bucket in the middle. This is all about analytics and business intelligence. There's Synapse, there's big data, data lake, there's data movers, data bricks and search and so forth. And then the newest member of our family on the right-hand side, this is all about data governance. And then here's where Azure Purview plays. And there we have a growing set of capabilities. We have, so far, there's a data catalog, there's data share. And I'll have a few things to say about this bucket in a little bit. So that's the big picture. And so let's zoom in on Azure SQL. And some of you may know Azure SQL actually is a brand that encompasses three offers. There is the infrastructure as a service offering, and this is basically 100% compatible SQL running in virtual machines. Easy to install and configure. A few buttons. You can choose the VM. You can choose the version of SQL Server, and then you have a running system inside a compute VM. And here the goal is it's essentially for those lift and shift scenarios, or where you have workloads that require just a little bit more access on the operating system level. And then we have two more offers, all under this Azure SQL umbrella. And these are platform as a service offerings. There's Azure SQL Managed Instance, and there's Azure SQL Database. And the same here, you get the single engine code base that you come to know from SQL Server on-premise. So you're really getting a battle-hardened relational database management system, but you get more, namely you get all the benefits and conveniences of a cloud, namely you get the elasticity and the scale, you get the easy button deployment, you get upgrades, you get patching and so forth. And what I want to stress here is across all three offers, you get the same comprehensive, innovative security portfolio that will let you run your applications and workloads in a secure manner, no matter which of these three options you choose. Okay, so now here we are. Let's talk a little bit about the pillars. When we talk about security, we found that it's most convenient to actually talk about different areas like authentication, data protection, network security, because it helps sort of understand what the protection that individual features afford. It helps customers choose between related features. If I know I have a bunch of options that are all helping me, in terms of authentication or data governance, it might be easier to choose which one is better in a certain situation. And but it's also important in its own right to sort of figure out how do I, given that we have so many different features, how do I actually devise a security story here? So that's why we have the buckets, and I'm gonna go and look at each of these areas. That's next.
Joachim, when I look at these security pillars, it makes a lot of sense to group them this way. But earlier you talked about Azure compliance, and I'm just curious, how does compliance for Azure and Azure SQL kind of fit into these pillars?
That's a great question, Anna. You're right. I did talk about compliance, and the goal here is I wanted to remind the audience that compliance and data privacy are actually a shared responsibility. So yes, Azure, we do our absolute best to make sure that we comply with all these regulatory compliances that I mentioned a few slides ago. We absolutely do our best to make sure that we're in compliance with all the privacy laws like GDPR, that we're meeting our own Microsoft privacy statement. However, as I said, it's a shared responsibility. And so if a customer, for example, inadvertently over provisions a user or provides access to an unauthorized user to their data, then no matter how hard we work, no matter what kind of security protection we put in place, the customer's data is now at risk, and they may actually be non-compliant. So having this reminder here is essentially for our audience to think about what kind of compliances and privacies am I responsible for? What do I have to do? Where's my part in this contract? And then the good news is they can use all these features that we have here to make sure that they are hardening the applications and meeting all the obligations from their perspective. So that's really the reason why I mentioned this again. It's an important point. So thanks, Anna. Okay, so let's jump in. So the first bucket or the first area of features is really about two things. It's about ensuring that users who want to access a database are really who they are, who they say they are, and that's called authentication. And once authenticated, it's about ensuring that users only have access to the information that they're entitled to, and that's authorization or access control. And so when we in the next episode, when we step into through the details here, we'll have a bunch of features to cover. I just want to point out a few highlights. And the first thing I want to point out is that authentication, identity management overall, that's really the job of Azure Active Directory. And most of the Azure data services are actually integrating, are integrated with AAD, including Azure SQL, of course. And that brings, two important benefits. It gives our customers single sign-on, meaning you authenticate once, and then you can move fluidly across applications or tools, for example, without having to go through a sign-on or authentication again. And the other benefit is conditional access, which helps customers implement what we call what's known in the industry as zero trust or never trust and always validate. Meaning, so for example, here's multi-factor authentication is an example, or customers can use conditional access policies to basically restrict access to come from certain locations, or where users wanting to access their database can only do so from certain locations, from certain devices, during certain time windows. So that's really the benefit of conditional access in the context of AAD. We're also supporting SQL authentication, of course, and in the case of IaaS, we also have SQL authentication and Windows authentication through Active Directory. In terms of access control, we have a number of options here. We have role-based access control, or RBAC, through ARM. There's an Azure Resource Management Infrastructure and AAD. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the rich set of roles and permissions that that SQL itself provides. And both RBAC or role-based access control and SQL permissions are devised so that customers can implement the principle of least privilege.
Hey, Joachim, just to interrupt for a second, I hear a lot about separation of duties and separation of concern, and now you mentioned principle of least privilege. What's the difference, and how should I think about this, or why should we care?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. A good reminder. I should have explained a little bit more. They're both very important security principles, and they're both enforced through proper access or implemented through proper access control. The principle of least privilege states that code modules or users or processes should only have access to the information they absolutely need in order to perform a particular job function. And separation of duty, on the other hand, is all about configuring roles in such a manner that management operations, like for example, creating backups, can be performed by a specifically designed role, rather than having to over provision the DBA, having a single sort of all-powerful admin in the system. And like I said, they're both very important security principles, and they are enforced and implemented through access control.
Gotcha. That helps. Thank you.
Yep. I do want to mention one more thing about row-level security. It's a great feature, and that lets security officers create access policies that basically control data down to the row level. However, we like to think about row-level security more as an application security feature in situations where the ad hoc query and access to the database is restricted, because there are cases, vulnerabilities like side channel attacks are possible, which are basically carefully crafted queries that are known to be able to circumnavigate or circumvent the RLS policy. So just a word of caution here. It's we think of it more as an application security feature that can help control data, but it's important to understand that it has to be in a situation where the application accesses the database, typically through stored procedures or in a very controlled manner. Good. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about data protection. And this bucket here is all about, as the tagline says, protecting sensitive information. And it's received particularly high interest recently from both our customers, because everybody's embracing the cloud. Customers are moving more and more data into the cloud. But it's also an interesting and an important one for cloud service providers, because we, on the other hand, we want to make sure that we are instilling trust in our customers, that we're doing the right thing with their data, that we're not abusing anything, that we're protecting it in a manner that's in accordance to all regulations and compliances. And so at the heart of this bucket, of this area, of course, is encryption. And there's many different types of encryption, and the real details about cryptography and so forth, they're pretty complex, and they're beyond the scope of this episode. But you'll hear a little bit more when we dive deeper here. But I think suffice it to say, in Azure, we offer 3 different encryption solutions which help you protect data in all 3 states. That is, data in transit, and we use transport security layer for this. Data at rest, we have, for example, transparent data encryption is one of the features that we use to do that. We also have, of course, volume encryption in some cases. And then we have encryption in use through always encrypted. Both transport layer security, so encryption in transit and encryption at rest, are table stakes. They're very inexpensive, and they're on by default, actually. So wherever you go in Azure data, you'll get those. They don't have to think about it. It's there for you. Always encrypted, actually, it's an interesting feature. I just want to spend a minute there. This is the only industry encryption solution that's offered by any database company that actually protects sensitive data against unauthorized use. And by this, I mean, any adversary or bad guy, who has already taken over the server, for example. So protects data against unauthorized use, while at the same time allowing the engine to process some queries against the encrypted data. And there's two flavors of this. One uses deterministic encryption, so it's based on encryption, completely on encryption. And the second, more recent version that we're continuously innovating as well uses secure enclaves or secure regions in the chip and confidential computing. So you'll hear a lot more about Always Encrypted in episode number 3. And so I think it'll be exciting. This is one of the really exciting features that we are working on. Let me say, before I move on, let me talk a quick word on key management. Encryption is one thing, so choosing the right cryptography solution is one thing. Choosing the right key management solution is equally important. And so if you look at transparent data encryption or encryption at rest, we have a couple options here. By default, you get what's known as service managed keys. So Microsoft manages the keys, but there's other options where we let customers bring their own keys. So these are shared solutions where you bring the key. Microsoft does have access to the key in some cases. And then we have the third option, host your own key, which is complete exclusive control of the key is in the hands of the customer. And the reason I'm saying this is important is because there's pros and cons in each. In some cases, compliance regulations demand one solution over another. There's also a cost to key management. And finally, that goes back to the shared responsibility. Managing keys with key management comes great responsibility. And so if customers are not careful, that could also put their data at risk again. So I'll stop here on the encryption part. Again, more coming when we dive deeper. There's one more feature that I wanted to talk about here, and this is dynamic in this context. That's dynamic data masking. And dynamic data masking has a slightly different protection scenario from encryption, because masking is not encryption. And so again, when we think about dynamic data masking, we're thinking more about application security. So this feature is helping you and secure your applications by limiting either accidental exposure to sensitive data and query results. And it's important to note that only the data in the actual query result is masked. The original data on disk, for example, is unmasked or is unprotected here. So again, it's good to keep that in mind. And one last parting thought on this bucket here. It's important when customers think about their protecting against cyber attacks, or when they talk about cybersecurity and encryption. It's important to understand that encryption cannot be the only solution, the only game in town. It's always important to understand that security comes through defense in depth, and so encryption has to be paired with other complementary controls like access. We talked about access control earlier, rather than relying exclusively on encryption just because it sounds like this is the thing that I need and that'll do the trick. So just be careful, make sure that you're always thinking about a multitude of controls, and that's why we're talking about these different buckets and the fact that we have options in each bucket. And so if you take dynamic data masking, for example, that's a great example for a control that could be used together with other controls like encryption and access control and so forth, to really provide you a sound security strategy.
Thanks, Joachim. This has been really helpful so far. I know we still have a lot more to do, but this has been really, really interesting so far. This last piece there that you have data integrity coming soon. What is that?
Oh, yeah. So I have a couple teasers here and there. I wasn't going to talk much about it, but you're right. We're super excited about that too. Let me just say this. So far, we've talked a lot about or actually exclusively about confidentiality of data, but there's actually an equally important area, namely that's all about integrity, and that's about providing customers with controls to either detect tampering or even prevent tampering of their data. So what the feature that's coming here is going to be all about giving customers these additional controls to prevent or to protect the integrity of the data. So yeah,
cool.
You'll hear more about that. Okay, so let's descend down the stack a little bit and talk about network security. And as the tagline here talks about, this is really around the investments that we're making to provide our customers with industry-leading, best-of-breed controls to control access to their data, from network controls to prevent to control access to their data. So we've got a couple options here, and so these controls range from private VNets for their managed, so for the Azure SQL managed instance servers, for example, or the option to create a private endpoint for an Azure SQL database and then connect that securely to, for example, a storage account or a key vault, again using private IP. Or the ability to create network security groups. So these are all investments we're making to help guard, protect access to data from a network perspective. We talked about it earlier from an authentication and authorization perspective. So again, here you can see complementary controls coming into the picture. But we're also, and so here are these teasers again, we're also investing in some of the other themes. And so one area that's, of course, of great concern to us and to customers is preventing exfiltration. And so here we're, one of the areas that we're going into is to have outbound firewall rules that do exactly this, namely to control the egress of data from servers and from databases. And then another area is this is an infrastructure upgrade. So we know that customers are running out of IPv4 addresses. So what we have done is we're actually embarking on a large infrastructure upgrade, first at the back end, our gateways and so forth, but then also some of the customer-facing components to basically future-proof our infrastructure and sort of snap into the world of IPv6. So both of those are coming soon. And again, when we talk about the episode on network security, we'll have a lot more details for you on these topics.
One more question, and maybe this links into Azure Purview, but it seems like, oh, you know what? Sorry. This is really interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I got off on a tangent. I'll just let you keep talking.
No, that's okay. So yeah, there may be some questions from the audience too, but feel free to interrupt at any time. Maybe if it's going a little fast, that's perfectly okay. But since you mentioned governance, that's a perfect cue here. So let's talk a little bit about governance. I mentioned earlier, this is an area that we're just getting into. And governance is really covers a broad area of capabilities and features. And so we've got a few things to talk about here. So let me start with the governance that actually is built into SQL, into Azure SQL. And granted, it's somewhat basic, but it at least gives customers the ability to classify data, to classify columns in their databases, in their tables. And by classifying, I mean you have the option to essentially attach what we call sensitivity tags to columns. And then the value here comes not only in saying, okay, I know what data I have and I can classify it based on the sensitivity, but we've actually done more. We have combined the classification with auditing, SQL auditing, which is essentially allows you to monitor actions against, for example, against tables who accesses what. And so what we've done is we've augmented this with these labels so that when somebody accesses a table that has tagged columns in it, the tags will actually flow into the audit log. So when you do forensics later on, you can see, aha, this was not just access of the employee table, but we actually have some sensitive columns here. So I better keep drilling down into what's happened. So that's one thing. And the other thing that we're enabling is the flow of these labels from SQL into Power BI. So from now on, when Power BI, when customers create a Power BI report or when they do it, create a dashboard, they will have these labels, these sensitivity labels in their report, and Power BI can now treat this data in accordance with the sensitivity and with the classification of the original data. So those are two pretty cool scenarios that we can enable just by having classification. But as I mentioned, classification is the data governance is so much more. It's not just classification. And so this is where Azure Purview comes in. So Azure Purview, as you may know, is our unified sort of enterprise level data governance solution that spans all of Azure data and even beyond. And so rather than us sort of trying to duplicate capabilities that the Purview team is building, we decided it's best for our customers if we just focus on doing a deep integration with Purview, so that we're bringing them all the advanced capabilities that Purview is bringing to SQL without having to do any duplication of effort, which probably will result in some suboptimal results. So what does that actually mean today? So if with Purview today, customers can actually already, they can scan and classify their data either using sort of built-in scanners or custom scanners through Purview. And so they can create a catalog, they can do data lineage tracing. So all of these options are enabled in Azure Purview today, and they're available to customers. And here again is another teaser.
This is pretty interesting. Can you tell us more about this teaser?
Yep, I'm sure. Yeah, audience is interested in that. So when you actually do these things that I described, when you classify your data, when you create a data catalog, one of the things that we're going to layer on top is the ability to actually now take it to the next level, to be able to create protection policies in Purview in a central control plane, and then have these policies enforced by all of the data stores where this data is managed. So once you classify and tag your data, no matter where that data goes, through these Purview policies, customers now can enforce certain additional security protection.
Cool. And, one more question, because it seems like Azure Purview is coming up a lot. If SQL customers are serious about enterprise data governance, would it be a safe assumption to say that, going forward, it's going to be important to leverage these integrations with Azure Purview rather than the SQL native capabilities? Is that kind of the right way to think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is exactly the way to think about it. Like I said earlier, we have some basic capability built into SQL. And now with Purview, with this large investment that we're making across the organization, it just doesn't make sense for us to continue to duplicate any features here. So rather than that, we are basically opted for the deep integration with Purview. So any customer of SQL will get all of these capabilities through Purview, which essentially provides so much more, because, as I said, Purview is a unified solution. So you will not only see the data that you have in Azure SQL, but Purview extends to all the other, to your entire estate. So data that's in Cosmos, in Synapse, in storage, even outside of Azure, all of this can be governed through Purview, which we think is really a much better value proposition.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're into the pillar that contains some of the capabilities that we have to not only prevent threats, but also to detect the threats, and then to track any of these sort of attacks that might be detected. So this is the threat prevention and detection bucket. And here the central capability that we have here is comes through Azure Defender. And some of you may know Azure Defender from some of the other services, maybe even from Windows. And so we have something called Azure Defender for SQL, for Azure SQL. And it's you can think of it as a package of two capabilities. And let me actually go to the next bullet just for clarity. So the two capabilities in Azure Defender are there's a vulnerability assessment piece here, and you can think of vulnerability assessment basically as your resident in-house security expert. It's a rule-based engine that essentially scans the configuration of your Azure SQL resources, and then for gaps and misconfigurations, and then in case they are detected, it raises an alert. It shows you the vulnerability, the violation of these rules. And what's really cool here is it actually doesn't leave you hanging there. It gives you the option in some cases to actually mitigate those vulnerabilities. So that's Azure Defender Vulnerability Assessment. And the second capability, it's called threat detection or advanced threat protection. You can think of this as your sort of 24/7 watchdog that monitors traffic coming in and out of your Azure SQL databases, and it will alert if it finds anything. And so what are these type of events that it looks out for? Well, of course, there's any kind of injection attacks, and then there is anomalous database access and sort of query patterns. And this could be somebody all of a sudden trying to exfiltrate megabytes and megabytes of data where this has not happened before. So this is deemed an unusual event. But there could also be any kind of other sort of suspicious activity against the database that this defender will flag. For example, access from an unknown IP address or from an IP address that is known to be bad. So this watchdog will cover these events, and in case it detects a potential threat or an attack, it will send an alert, and this alert will come either to your email or and actually I should say it will go into the Azure portal, and it will also show up in Azure Security Center. So and here the cool thing is that these alerts that are coming, they're actually action oriented, and that brings me to the next capability, SQL auditing, which of course most of you know has been in SQL for pretty much since day one. What's cool here is that auditing and threat detection are one of those better together pairs. Namely, if the customer has auditing turned on and threat detection is running and a potential threat is detected, then the alert that you're getting could actually point you into your audit logs in case there are events in there that seem to be related or that may be related to this particular attack. So this is helps, of course, with the attack analysis, with any kind of forensics that one may need to do later. So this is a really cool story here. Quick word: we've also we continuously enhance audit, and so one of the what we've recently done is we've given customers the ability to actually flow audit events to their audit store that have to do with Microsoft DevOps doing troubleshooting. So here, while we've always captured DevOps actions internally and reviewed them because that's a compliance requirement, what we're now doing is we're giving customers the option to flow those events into their own private audit store, so that hopefully generates or provides a little more transparency when it comes to DevOps operations that we do.
Yogam, if I could interrupt you for a second. Yeah. Sorry. I know, when you throw out the words DevOps and what cloud operators are doing, sometimes it makes people a little nervous. And I'm sure this auditing is a great, step towards giving a little more clarity into what's happening here. But can you provide any more insights that might help put people at ease?
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a good one, and I've come across these nervous reactions many times, and rightfully so. If I put my data in the cloud, I want to know exactly what's happening. And so yeah, let me just take a minute here and make a few state a few clarifications. So first of all, Microsoft Azure SQL DevOps will never access customer databases unless there is an approved, customer approved and legitimate case where, for example, a resource is down or the customer has asked us to come in and help troubleshoot an incident because their database, their application, whatever resource they're running is down and they need help. And so this is where then the our on-call engineers are. This is what the DevOps I'm referring to. This is where they spring into action. But our DevOps, the actions by DevOps are always scoped to the smallest sort of resource. They are reviewed. They're reviewed by multiple eyes. They're time-based. And our DevOps always using pre-approved and well-defined troubleshooting DMVs that have, as I said, well-defined action. And so, and then of course the engineers are background checked and all of these things. So there's a very strict choreographed protocol that we're following. And as you said, now having these audit logs from these troubleshooting sessions flow into a customer's audit log will hopefully provide additional transparency here. So yeah, thanks. This was this is an important point. Finally, we have in this bucket also, I do want to call out Azure Security Center integration. And so think of this as your dashboard, your one dashboard where you can go to manage the security posture of all your resources. It's a single pane of glass, and what helps you here are things like secure score, as I said, vulnerability violations that are displayed here. We're showing threat alerts, and in general give you an overview of your entire estate and how you're doing according against compliances and so forth. So that's the threat prevention and detection bucket. And with that, let me actually come to a quick sort of summary here. So these are the 5 buckets again, quite a few features. And what I have in mind now is actually give you a quick overview of Azure Security Center, because I think of all the features here, this exemplifies one of the goals that our team has, namely to show you that configuring and securing Azure SQL database actually doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be scary. So that's what I'll do.
Awesome. That'd be great, Joachim. And we just have about 15 to 17 minutes left, so we'd love to see what you have, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving into this. Okay, great. So let me quickly switch gears here. So and make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so this, for those of you who haven't seen it, this is Azure Security Center. It's your one-stop dashboard for security posture of your resources, and depending on what your intentions are, there's sort of there's about 4 or 5 different entry points. So at a first glance, it may look a little bit overwhelming, but let me actually walk you through it. So if you are a user who wants to check this dashboard frequently, and you want to get sort of an up-to-date kind of a quick up-to-date glance of where things are, you may want to direct your attention to this sort of this kind of top portion of Security Center here. So it shows us that we have 1 subscription, we have 27 recommendations, and we have 6 security alerts. So if you just want to get a quick glimpse, then you could, for example, drill in here. So we can say, so what are those security alerts?
And so here they are. And again, remember, this is now covering an entire subscription. In my case, this is our demo and test subscription. We've got about 230 or so resources in here. So this gives me an at-a-glance view of what are the security alerts that we've seen recently. And so here we've got, as I mentioned earlier, we've got login from a principal that hasn't been seen in a while, or traffic detected from an address that was recommended for blocking. And so this is one way to utilize this dashboard, and you can come in here now and you can click on these and you can start figuring out forensics, what happened here, should I block this IP address, and things like that. So that's one way to go. Another way to sort of utilize this dashboard is to come over here and sort of see, what kind of insights are there, what are the important insights, are there some low-hanging fruit maybe that I can use. And especially in light of our security score here, as you can see here, this might help you figure out, okay, 60%, or I'm at, as it says here, 34 points out of 50 some or so. That's quite low. What can I do to quickly improve my security posture for the overall, for my entire subscription? So that might be another way to jump in. And so if we go here, as I said, this now shows you what your overall posture is, and so we could now come here and see, this looks a little low. What's the first thing I can do to sort of raise the score? And so it seems like the low-hanging fruits here are around remediating vulnerabilities. As you can see on the right-hand side, potential score increase is 6 points or 10%. And what's exciting here is that, so first of all, I see my vulnerabilities here, but then you can see this quick fix button here. And so it doesn't just show you what you could do, but if you actually click on this button, it will actually take you to a place where you can action these violations. I can come here now and say, oh, okay, you can pick one of these servers here and then go in and actually remediate. I notice Defender is turned on, and I can now go in here and start remediating. So this is one way. Another way to sort of utilize the dashboard. Another pivot on this is over here, something called regulatory compliance. So if you're interested, or if you have requirements around SOC or PCI or ISO, then you can drill down here. So let's do this for a second. And so here you see we have actually at this point 4 compliances that we're monitoring for you. There's the Azure Security Benchmark on the left there, and these are about 11 or so control families that we in Azure have established as a criteria for measuring the security posture of your servers. Or if you're interested in some of the commercial compliances, then we also track SOC, PCI, and ISO for you. And what this means really is you can come here and you can see, okay, in terms of the security benchmark, I'm amiss with these control families. Or let's say you're interested in ISO, then you've got some work to do in these control families. So for example, here it shows that I have some in this control family A6, there's some work here where I may have some misconfigurations in terms of segregation of duties. So I have probably either over-provisioned or too many owners. And so I can go back and I can start fixing these violations here, and that will then allow me to raise my score, not only my overall score, but I can then start thinking about how do I become compliant against ISO, for example. And then another entry point here that I want to point out is you can pivot on inventory. So we could go and say, well, let me actually look at what inventory I have here. What are all these resources? And if that ever loads, here we go. So that, of course, is a fairly big list. But what I could do is I could sort of filter this down and say, well, again, remember, this is our test subscription. So we've got VMs in here, we've got SQL in here. So this is, and we've got network in here, network components. So that's actually the beauty of Security Center. It tracks your entire estate. So what we could do here is we can say, well, rather than looking at all of them, let me just look at my logical servers. And so here they are, and so I can see that some of them have a lot of red over here, lots of recommendations. So I can go to a test server here, and now I can see, okay, if I want to bring this server up to a secure configuration, these are some of the things I need to do. So, for example, I haven't turned on VA on this particular server, and when I click here, I can now go down. Sorry if it's a little bit small, but I can. I have 3 options actually. I can click on the remediate button, which will then take me to a page where I can turn on vulnerability assessment for this particular server. Or I can trigger a logic app. I don't have one defined here, but that basically allows me to basically do this automatically. Once a violation is established, I can kick off these apps, and remediation will be done automatically. Or that's also interesting. I can say, no, actually, I want to exempt this server because this is a test server. I'm only using it with some with some synthetic data. Don't even worry about it. So these are the 3 options you have here. And so that's another way to utilize this dashboard. And then let me finally just click on the Defender button here, since we've talked so much about Defender. So as I said, Defender comes in different flavors. We talked about Defender for SQL, for Azure SQL. And here you can see that I actually have a number of, that I have almost my entire estate covered. I've got servers, I've got Azure SQL database servers, I've got Defender for storage, app services, and so forth. And then there's a couple here that I haven't turned on. So it gives me the option to upgrade my Defender package. And so this is actually relatively new. I can now also defend my resource manager subscriptions, DNS subscriptions. And so this is really a dashboard for Defender. So if I'm only interested in security alerts, then I'll come here. And as you can see over on this side, here there's the most prevalent security alerts, again grouped for some quick action where you can figure out, okay, what are the most important actions that I have to do right now? So it helps you prioritize what to do. So that's Security Center at a glance. There's a whole lot more here. So for example, in order to turn on the Defender, you can come to the pricing settings and page here. So here's my demo subscription. And as I mentioned earlier, I have Defender for quite a few of my resources. So this is a way to turn this on. And then here's the option for me to also turn it on for Resource Manager and for DNS, which is in preview right now. So this is just a quick overview of this. So so I'm going to stop here, and I'll take us back to our presentation. Like I said, there's a lot more here to go and dive into, and we'll do that in one of the following episodes, especially the one that talks about threat detection and threat protection.
Awesome.
So,
thanks, Joachim. As you switch back, we did get one question related to threat detection. I thought it might be a good chance to ask it. This person's coming from Twitch, and they said, are you using machine learning algorithms on the edge to monitor the activities as well, specifically for threat detection?
Yes. So threat protection today works for the Azure SQL resource offers that I pointed out earlier, namely VMs and the 2 PaaS offerings. We are also protecting Azure Arc. We have not gotten to protecting Azure SQL on edge, but this is coming soon. So that's definitely on our list. We just haven't gotten there yet. But we have the Defender now for Arc. So these are the hybrid offerings that we have, and Edge is coming.
Awesome. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
This has really been a lot of awesome content. Just looking at these different pillars, there's a lot of things here. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series, but before we kind of wrap up for the day, I'd love to hear if you have any parting thoughts or advice for viewers.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Good question. I think in terms of what the audience should take away from this session, I think there's if nothing else, if the audience realizes that we have not only a comprehensive but also an innovative portfolio of security features, meaning not only can I find the right controls to create a security strategy that mitigates the risk that I have identified in my risk assessment, but also that customers feel that I can actually trust the Azure security team, that they're developing the next set of security features that help me protect my databases in this ever-changing threat landscape. And then finally, hopefully the realization, as I said earlier, that security doesn't have to be scary, that we're working hard to make protecting Azure SQL resources as easy, if that's the right term here, and a little bit less scary than what people may have thought coming into the session. So if they can take away, and if they feel like we've convinced them that these three kind of bullets or goals are true, then I'll be elated, and I would consider this session a success. And hopefully folks will then come back because we do have I think a really exciting agenda laid out. We have some preliminary dates, so we will follow a 2 months cadence here. So every 2 months we'll have a new episode for you. And these episodes are, consider these drill downs into these areas that we introduced here today. And so hopefully if you have specific questions that, of course, didn't get answered today, I hope you'll come back and you'll join us for the next 5 episodes with my colleagues and I and Anna here in the same forum.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joachim. This has been just a really awesome kind of overview session, but pretty deep for an overview. So I think everyone will have really learned a lot from this and also gotten to see kind of the insights of where we're going. And now comes kind of an even more exciting part, because we're going to, over the next few months, kind of dive deeper into each of these security pillars. So I'm looking forward to learning more. I think our viewers are going to really enjoy this as well. We've seen a lot of positive content. You can see on Twitch, someone said lots of great content. Someone says good content. So people are enjoying this. People are excited about this, and we're excited about it too. And so we hope that everyone will continue to join us. It seems like just about every other month we'll be adding a new episode. You can follow us on Azure SQL on Twitter to stay up to date on when exactly those episodes will be launching. And if you miss an episode, you can just head over to our YouTube channel. We'll be putting all of the episodes in a playlist together. So if you want to just watch the Azure SQL Security series, you can do that as well. Let me just check if we have any parting questions. Mostly just people saying thanks and yay and great content. So great job, Joachim. Thanks so much again for joining us today. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you like this video, please go ahead and like, retweet, subscribe from wherever you are. And we hope to see you next time on Data Exposed.
It's been great fun for us as well here. And see you next time. See everybody next time.